a Fox News alert. Welcome to Hannity. The voters of New Hampshire have now spoken, and Fox News is projecting that Donald Trump has scored a decisive win in the Republican primary with 35% of the vote. Ohio Governor John Kasich has taken second place with 16%. And at this hour, Ted Cruz, Jeb Bush, Marco Rubio, they're in a tight race fighting for third place. Now, on the Democratic side, Vermont Senator, self-proclaimed socialist Bernie Sanders defeated Hillary Clinton decisively. Fox News projecting that Senator Sanders will win by more than 20%. Earlier tonight, Donald Trump celebrated his huge victory in the Republican primary with a rousing speech. Watch this.
We are going to make America great again. I am going to be the greatest jobs president that God ever created. Remember that. By the way, we're going to knock the hell out of ISIS. We're going to knock the hell out of them. We are going to start winning again, and we're going to win so much, you are going to be so happy. We are going to make America so great again, maybe greater than ever before. I love you all. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you. Thank you, New Hampshire. Thank you. We are going now to South Carolina. We're going to win in South Carolina. I love you all.
And joining us now live from downtown Manchester, New Hampshire, campaign Carl Cameron. Carl, what a night for Trump.
What a night indeed, and he's sort of rewritten the playbook for New Hampshire, and he has definitely thrown a scare into the Republican establishment with tonight's victory. Donald Trump is winning, and now he goes to South Carolina. And there's really not all that much of a surprise. It's closing time here at the Thirsty Moose. They're shutting things down on Elm Street in Manchester. And for three candidates tonight, closing time is a real threat. We're talking about Chris Christie, who has said that he's going to not go to South Carolina, but will go back to New Jersey to assess things after a disappointing showing tonight. There is a very real possibility that his position in the polls now will disqualify him for the upcoming Saturday debate in South Carolina, which was part of the fate that led to Rand Paul dropping out of the race when he wasn't going to be in the primetime debate just a week and a half ago after not doing well in Iowa. For Ben Carson, he left Manchester, New Hampshire, and left New Hampshire even before the polls closed tonight to go to South Carolina. And as he told us earlier this week, he's laying off staff, and after the New Hampshire primary, he plans to lay off another 20 or so. It'll bring the staff cuts to about 50, leaving him about 90 or so staffers across the country, but nowhere near what he had just a couple of weeks ago. And then there's Carly Fiorina. She says she's going to continue to stay in the race, but she's been having a hard time getting traction, and there are those who begin to think that some of these candidates really have to start thinking about perhaps cutting the string and getting out of the race in order to let the rest of the electorate coalesce around any kind of candidate who could challenge Trump. It is a great night for the real estate developer. Winning the First of the Nation primary by a decisive margin propels him into South Carolina, and a win in South Carolina could propel him all the way to the nomination. There have been those saying, even some of his rivals, that if he wins in New Hampshire and wins in South Carolina, he may be unstoppable, Sean.
Shep, is it late? You better get to last call, Carl, before they close
I went to Dixville Notch last. I drove to Dixville Notch last night. We were up all night long, so it's been 36 hours plus that we've been running on the campaign trail.
Totally understand. I think right over your shoulder there's a bar with a beer, and it has your name on it, and you deserve it. Thanks so much, campaign Carl Cameron. We appreciate it. Joining us now with reaction from the Weekly Standard, Fox News contributor Stephen Hayes, Fox News contributor Joe Trippi, and Fox News legal analyst Peter Johnson, Jr. Peter, I'll start with you. Thanks, John. Another establishment defeat that cannot be denied here. And more importantly, if I would have said to any of you three 9 months ago that Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders would have this decisive victory on this night in New Hampshire, I think you all would have thought that I'm crazy. Now, you probably think that anyway, but you would have thought I was really crazy. Peter.
I wouldn't have been calling you Sean. No, that wouldn't have been anything that we would have thought of, 9 months ago or 6 months ago or 3 months ago or even 2 months ago. And when you're called an establishment candidate, it's become a death knell. And so time and time again, these 4 or 5 folks, they're the establishment candidates. They're in the establishment lane. Well, the establishment lane is not going anywhere at this point. And at this point, Donald Trump, if it keeps up, is on his way to becoming the Republican presidential nominee. I don't think there's a question at all.
I've got to be honest. I tend to agree with you. It's going to be very hard to stop him. And I watched a lot of the analysis tonight, and in my opinion, it couldn't have been more off and more wrong by so many people. And I think they have predicted all along his fall, and it never came. Stephen Hayes, a big night also tonight. Trump had the biggest night. Big night for Bernie Sanders. Big night for John Kasich. And I would argue that Ted Cruz, spending as little money as he did, had a pretty good night for him as well, and he gets out of there heading into what he believes is friendly territory.
Yeah, Ted Cruz spent little money and not much time either. I think just 27 days here. This clearly was not a point of emphasis for Ted Cruz. He did particularly well with very conservative voters, as we would expect, and I think he sets himself up very nicely for the move into South Carolina, then on to Nevada, and then beyond to the March 1st SEC primaries. He's in a pretty good position. I'm blown away by the Bernie Sanders win tonight. The margin of victory, 21 points, give or take right now. A year ago today, Hillary Clinton had a 44-point advantage on Bernie Sanders here in New Hampshire. Now Bernie Sanders looks like he's going to win by 21 points. That is a 66-point net swing. It is absolutely stunning. And the same goes for Donald Trump. I mean, he doubled up John Kasich tonight, the second-place finisher. It is absolutely extraordinary. And you're right. This is a political earthquake. It is a message to Washington, the way things have been going. And you would think that members of Congress better be sitting up pretty straight and paying attention today.
You know, we've been trying to tell them for years, and they have been ineffective. They've been, frankly, lacking in backbone and strength, and they have been lost, and the base is telling them very strongly on both sides of the aisle. Now, when you look at the numbers here, Joe Trippi, Hillary lost every single demographic group except 65 plus and those making over $200,000 a year. How does she recover from this? Is South Carolina really a firewall for her?
I don't think South Carolina is as much a firewall as a place where she's particularly strong. And look, I predicted back in July that Trump was going to be around a lot longer than all the front runners back then, and thought he would win New Hampshire. Not this big. I thought all along that Sanders would win New Hampshire. But again, not this big. It was two big wins for both of them. The problem is going forward, this had to be the muddled finish that Donald Trump couldn't have written in a script for what he wanted to see happen, with none of the governors really emerging, and you know, Cruz coming in third, and Kasich, the one governor that did show up, not having a whole lot of places to go real quick. And then you've got Hillary Clinton, who, yes, suffered a big defeat tonight to Bernie Sanders. But again, as you move out of New Hampshire, the Democratic Party becomes much more diverse, and you start getting to more of her strengths with African Americans, Latinos, and other Democrats. The liberal wing of the party isn't as big a part of the party down in the South, for instance, in places like South Carolina. The question now is, can Bernie Sanders take this victory and use the energy that comes from it to expand into those groups, because so far he hasn't been able to do it. If he can, then he becomes a real threat to Hillary Clinton. If he cannot, and we'll know soon enough in South Carolina and Nevada.
But certainly the money after tonight is going to be pouring in, Joe. But the money's going to be pouring in. Momentum's on his side.
That's the whole point. Does that money, does that momentum, does that energy let him expand out into areas he has not been able to get to? There are a lot of moderate and conservative white Democrats that I think are still wondering what the whole democratic socialist thing means. Can he explain that, or can the energy just sort of blast through that? That's some of the things he's going to have to work on now. If he can't, then Hillary Clinton, yes, suffered a defeat. She'll be fighting back, and I think right now South Carolina is still going to be a place where she's going to win because of her strengths. It's not a firewall. It's because of who she is and who's supporting her there.
Peter, let's go to John Kasich. John Kasich put a stake in New Hampshire. He wanted to do well in this state. He was the one person that broke through. Can he carry that momentum into, for example, South Carolina? And what about Marco Rubio? I mean, Marco Rubio, I mean, you talk about a moment in a debate that could have changed the trajectory of a race. Certainly, he lost 8 points in the poll numbers since that debate that took place last week.
Yeah, you know, moments won and moments lost, and there was a point that Marco Rubio was trailing just by a few points in at least some polls Donald Trump nationally. Donald Trump still sees him as a problem going forward. Ted Cruz is a problem going forward. There's this muddled group of 4 or 5 folks that still pose an issue. The problem is they're going to cut each other's throats, and they're not going to consolidate and unify behind one candidate. And so, meanwhile, there'll be another debate on the 13th in which Donald Trump will probably emerge victorious, and the other candidates will spend an enormous amount of time and money trying to kill each other, probably
what about
with
the
very
demographics,
little
though?
effect. Well, the demographics are closer in South Carolina to Iowa.
Right.
It's a better state for Ted Cruz in that regard. But what you're talking about with Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, and what Joe Trippi knows best in terms of consultants, is the notion of being a front runner. Front runner status means a heck of a lot. And the sins of democratic socialism seem to be lost in translation, and Hillary Clinton's invincibility and invulnerability seems to be cracking day by day. Day by day.
Stephen Hayes, let me ask you the establishment insurgency question, because you had Ted Cruz in Iowa, you have Donald Trump by a huge margin now in New Hampshire, you have mixed results for the governors in both contests. Is there a point where the establishment is going to have to accept that one of the 2 people they don't like, Ted Cruz or Donald Trump, is going to be the nominee?
Yeah, I don't think we're at that point yet, John. I mean, we're talking about less than 2% of the delegates overall assigned. I think there's a long race to go. As Peter just, I think, said correctly, you've got this muddle going into South Carolina. Certainly that's advantageous right now for Donald Trump, because you have these, you know, establishment, or let's just say non-anti-establishment candidates that are likely to be beating each other up. One of the things I'm most interested in seeing as we head into this debate on Saturday night is whether there's a change in strategy from any of these candidates. Ted Cruz and Donald Trump have gone after each other in a pretty tough way over the past several weeks. Jeb Bush has taken on Donald Trump pretty directly, confronted him in his stump speeches and on the debate stage. Marco Rubio really hasn't done that as much. What's that?
You know, if you look at the money, Cruz spent, according to the numbers that I saw, anywhere between $700,000 and $800,000 in the airwaves, and Jeb Bush's campaign spent $35 million.
Incredible.
An incredible distinction there.
Yes.
Can Jeb Bush say that this is a breakout for him tonight?
You know, I don't think he can. I mean, I think that's a really tough sell. If you look at the delegate count, it's very early, but Bush trails Rubio and Cruz and Trump in the delegate count. If you want to talk about which establishment lane candidate has the best chance of breaking out, I forget who said it earlier, but I think John Kasich has some limits on where he's going to go. He doesn't have much of a ground game. He made a clear pitch to sort of liberal Republicans here in New Hampshire. Marco Rubio has a much higher net favorability rating than Jeb Bush does. Jeb is, I think, -1 right now. Rubio's +25 or thereabouts. I think it's just harder to have Jeb make that argument that he's now the one that people should rally around because Rubio had a bad moment in the debate.
All right, guys, thank you all for being with us. We appreciate it.